everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we are so excited today to talk to another author. We love talking with authors. And today we have Liz Johnson on the podcast to talk about her new book, The Last Way Home. And Liz, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yay. Well, why don't you start off? We'd like to learn a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about how you got started writing.
Sure. Well, I'm one of those writers who's just always been writing. I wrote my first short story when I was 7, and I signed my first publishing contract when I was 27. So for 20 years, I was writing a lot of really bad books and really bad stories. And then I took some writing courses and really just, kind of tried to hone my craft. And then my first book came out in 2009, and I've written romantic suspense, and I've written a historical romance novella, and right now I write contemporary romance. So you're going to notice a thread there that whatever I write has some romance in it because I adore that, and I love to write a good love story.
So how did you make that transition from writing, maybe writing bad things to actually getting something published, that first book published?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that the transition is in the writing, is in practicing writing. And for me, I was never going to become a better writer if I didn't keep writing, if I didn't write more and get more feedback. And like I said, I took some classes, and I took the Jerry Jenkins, it was the Christian Writers Guild What's Your Story correspondence course. And it was like a 2-year correspondence course where I was assigned a mentor, and every 2 weeks I had an assignment due. And I took that literally right after I graduated from college. I went from college into work, into taking that course. And it really was just really good for me, just in terms of learning the business side and learning about being a professional writer. And I think that is kind of a flip that has to switch for us. Let me try that again. That's a switch that has to flip for some people like me, that that I just needed just a little more understanding of the business side of writing, because writing it was always fun, but now it's a business too. It's part of the industry, I'm part of the industry. And so, it was great to sort of have a mentor who gave me feedback and gave me good input, and then to be a part of the community of writers, I think has been really good for me and encouraged me to keep writing.
So did you get an agent, or did you, how did you get that pitch kind of accepted for the first one?
Yeah. So my first book, I did not have an agent. And I had heard that Love Inspired Suspense, which is a division of Harlequin, would accept and look at manuscripts even without an agent. And so I said, okay. And so that was actually the first book that I sat down to write, to say, I think I want to try to publish this. I had them in mind, Love Inspired Suspense. And I said, okay, I'm going to send it to them. And I did. I sent my proposal in October, and in December, the day before I was going to leave to travel home for Christmas vacation, I got a rejection letter, and it was like, oh, what a way to celebrate Christmas. This is not how it's supposed to go. And so I was devastated, but I went home for Christmas, and then I got back to my home. I was living in Colorado at the time. And I said, I'm going to send them a thank you note, because what they said in their letter was not that we hate your book. They just said it wasn't ready. They said it didn't meet their guidelines. And I said, okay, so what do I have to do to make it meet your guidelines? And so I sent the editor a thank you note and said, I really appreciate your input. Could I make some changes and resubmit? She sent me back a 2-page letter that was change this, rewrite this, change this. And I said, okay, great. And I got back to work, and I made all those changes, and I sent the whole manuscript in. And then she sent me another letter that said, nope, still not there. Change this and this and this and this. We went back and forth 4 times. And by the end of it, I was like, this is never going to happen. But it was July, almost a year after I had first submitted, that I finally got the phone call saying, okay, it's ready. We want to offer you a contract. And I was like,
Oh my
what is
gosh.
happening? And so later, I talked with my agent or my editor. I talked with my editor years later and I said, how did my book get picked? And she was like, oh yeah, you were definitely pulled from the slush pile. Like you were like, they had somebody who read the slush pile, which is just,
Yeah.
unsolicited manuscripts that come in. And they had a reader whose job it was just to look for kind of the diamond in the rough. And she picked mine and said, hey, this looks really good, and gave it to the editor. And so then that editor who acquired me for my first book, it was her first book, like acquisition for
No
Harlequin
way.
Wit. And so it was really fun. And we worked together for like 9 years, and she was super great. And I loved working with her. And so, yeah, I always feel like my story is just a story of like persistence, like don't give up, but also be willing to make changes, because as writers, we love our babies so much. It's like, no, it's perfect as it is. But the truth is it can always be better. And so we're often blind to the faults in our own writing. And so it's really like, it's so important to have an outside voice speak into that. And so just to sort of hold it loosely and say, this is my baby and I love my book, but it can be better. And I want somebody to help me make it better.
That's a great story. I love that. I love that you sent that thank you note
Yeah.
and that she continued to work with you, and that's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, you kind of maybe already answered this a little bit, but would you say you're a pantser or a plotter?
So when I was writing for love inspired suspense, I had to be a plotter for
Hmm.
two reasons. Number one, they required it of me. And number two, it was suspense. And so like I needed to make sure that all of my threads made sense and it was all headed to the right ending. And do I have the right red herrings where I need them and that kind of thing. As I have moved into straight up contemporary romance without the mystery or suspense thread, I find that I'm a lot less of a plotter. So I like to think of myself as like a plantser, where I start to plot, but then I move into writing by the seat of my pants.
Yeah.
So yeah, I generally have a vision of like, okay, this is where I'm going. How do I get there? But a lot of the fun of writing for me is the discovery along the way, is like figuring out along the way what are these characters going to do? What are they going to say? How are they going to surprise me?
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast.
Escape to the Florida Emerald Coast this summer in The Beach Escape by Rachel McGee from Hallmark Publishing.
After a monumental heartbreak, Molly Lawrence is trying to start over as a traveling vet.
But Grant Torres, his charming dimples, and one stubborn loggerhead turtle named Chompers challenge the future Molly's imagined for herself.
The perfect beach read for your summer book list, The Beach Escape is a friends to lovers romance full of snorkeling, sailing, and of course, turtles.
The Beach Escape is available August 9th from Hallmark Publishing on Amazon and in stores at selected bookstores.
For more information about The Beach Escape and other titles by Rachel McGee, visit www.rachelmcgeebooks.com.
That's rachelmcgeebooks.com.
I noticed that you had done a bunch of different genres in your writing. And how does that all happen? How do you decide, okay, this next book's going to be contemporary, this next book's going to be historical, whatever it might be?
Yeah.
Did they come to you and say, we want another mystery, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So while I was writing for Love Inspired Suspense, I loved writing suspense for them, but I knew it sort of in my heart that I had more stories to tell that didn't fit the Love Inspired specific. Like they have like a really kind of specific audience that they're shooting for and a specific length. They're fairly short. They're like 55,000 words as compared to most full length trade books generally are 80 to 85,000 or more. And so I knew that I had other stories to tell. And when I first visited Prince Edward Island in 2010, I had this moment where I never anticipated writing about PEI. And then after visiting, I was like, no, this island is full of stories and I want to tell them. But they weren't necessarily mysteries or suspense, you know. And so that was sort of my transition out of suspense and into getting to write, you know, straight up contemporary, was just basically setting and what the story, you know, what the setting sort of inspired in me. And my one historical novella that I wrote, I loved writing, but writing historical is so hard because it requires so much research, and every single word you have to check, was this in use at, you know, during this time period that I'm writing in? Like, what were they wearing? What, you know, like, what was their life like? And so it was really a challenge, but it was so much fun. And that came about because the publisher was looking for some historical stories for a collection. It was a log cabin Christmas collection was the name of the book, and they wanted 9 authors to write novellas for that. And a funny story about that one is I got passed over in their first round. They had 9 authors they decided on, and I was number 10 on their list. And so they were like, sorry. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it disappointment, and like, this is part of the industry, and like, you learn to like deal with rejection. But it was one of those things where it was like, oh, this isn't fun. And then I was at my day job at work, and I had my phone kind of off to the side, and I wasn't checking my you know, personal email or anything. And all of a sudden at like 6 o'clock, I get a call and a text from my agent, like basically at the same time. And she's like, where are you? They want your story. And I was like, oh. And so anyway, so they had an author drop out of the collection, and they picked me. So yeah. So
That's so cool.
yeah,
Y-
I think that's like, that's kind of the story of my publishing career. I like to say, like, every publisher I've ever worked with has rejected me at least once for a book that they eventually, you know,
Yeah.
came back and said they wanted. So rejection is such a part of it, but you learn to have kind of thick skin.
Now, when you're writing for somebody like Harlequin or Baker Publishing, or do you are they open to hearing your pitches in other categories, or is it almost like starting over again uh, when you start with a new category?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for Love Inspired, when I was writing Love Inspired suspense for them, they wanted me to continue in suspense. But if I had said, I have just a like a regular Love Inspired that's not a suspense, I think they would have been open to that and definitely would have been interested in that. Uh, Working with Baker, and Revell is my, you know, my division of Baker that I publish with, and they yeah, they have been just like a great team to work with in terms of like brainstorming what's next. Like, what do we want to do next? And so, for example, I wrote a 3-book series set on Prince Edward Island, and I loved it. And then we were kind of chatting about what's next. And at the time, split time books were like just kind of getting started and were really launching. And I said, I think I'd like to write a split time with like a little bit of historical and a little bit of contemporary. And, you know, like, what do you guys think about that? And so we had great discussions about it. And then I wrote a 3-book series called The Georgia Coast Romance, which is contemporary mostly, but then has these historical aspects either in journals or letters or kind of, you know, history that comes out. And they're looking for lost treasure in all the books. And so that was really fun to be on a treasure hunt.
Mm-hmm. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to me. So, what? So, are you a big this particular new series is a hockey series, right? The
Well, it's a Prince Edward Island brother series. And
Okay,
the current book, the most recent release, The Last Way Home, is about a disgraced NHL hockey player.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. It seems like there's a lot of hockey
It is.
in romance, and I'm not sure why that there's that crossover. I mean, you'll see other sports, but I feel like I've seen a lot of hockey books.
Mhm.
And are you a big hockey fan?
I do like hockey. I am not like an avid fan. I wouldn't say that I like follow follow any particular team or anything. And I always joke, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. And so I'm in the desert, the desert. But we do have a hockey team here. We have the Coyotes is our NHL team. And so long story is when I used to work, when I lived in Colorado Springs, like 15, almost 20 years ago, they, everybody there has like a winter sport, like you're a skier or a snowboarder or something. And I was like, well, I don't want to do any of those things because cold, and also because I'm kind of a wimp and I'm pretty sure I'm going to break a leg. So instead I decided to pick up figure skating. And I took, when I was 26, I took my first figure skating lesson. And let me tell you, I was not great. I'm still not great. But they had, like, the city had these public skate lessons, and you could like sign up, and it was adult learn to skate. And so I started anyway, and I bought my own pair of skates. And so then I left Colorado Springs, I moved, and I kind of lost my momentum going skating. And so I moved back to Arizona a few years ago and moved to Phoenix. And I said, I have to find an ice skating rink. I have to find something. And so I started looking, and it turns out that there's several around the city, and a lot of them are kind of tied to the Coyotes, our NHL team. But there is one that I went to pretty much every weekend for over a year. Like every Saturday I was at the public skate, and I would go and I would just be there. But the rinks during the public skate are full of like little tiny hockey players, like, like 6 and 7-year-olds who are out there, and their pads are bigger than they are. And they're like, like skating around, and they're super fun. But then you also have like the grown up, like the guys pick up hockey games. And so then you've got a lot of attractive, hockey players out there, just playing around and whatever. And there was one particular guy, I don't know if I should confess this, but he doesn't know who he is. So there was this one guy who was just starting to gray a little bit. And I think he was there with his daughter, but he never wore a ring. So I assumed he was a single dad. And he would come like almost every week. And he and his daughter were both excellent skaters. And they were they wore their hockey skates, and they're out there and they're doing their thing. And I called him my silver fox, because he would every time we were on the ice together, he would very nearly run into me, and I would very nearly throw myself at him, but I didn't. I kept myself together. Yeah. So I love hockey. I love skating. I love skaters. I think that there's just well, number one, I love it because it's the only place in Arizona guaranteed to be cool.
Yeah.
Inside the hockey rink is yep, I can guarantee that I'm going to need to wear my gloves and my hat, which is fun. But I think that there's I think one of the appeals to hockey players is that they're known to be really tough. Most people have probably heard that saying, I went to a hockey game, or I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out. There's always going to be a fight at a hockey game. There's generally some sort of rough and tumble aspect to it. And so there's this strength to hockey players, but I think that it often goes deeper than that too, because there's this teamwork. It's not an individual sport. It's very much a team effort, and the team has to work together and know how to work together. And so I think that that's appealing, and they're that just inspires all sorts of characteristics and character qualities that I love to write about, which is, one of the things that I love to write about in The Last Way Home. Plus, you can always make them big and broody and, and handsome guys. Yeah. So who doesn't love to read and, watch that?
Yeah. Well, I can see where you got a lot of inspiration for this new book, and especially Eli when he's the coach.
Yes.
All those little hockey players.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. So do you find it difficult to add the faith elements in a book like this without it being cloying or preachy, or, is that hard?
It's not too challenging for me at this point. And I hope that I do it well. I think because faith is such an ingrained part of my life that I go to church on Sunday and I want to be preached at then, but I don't generally want to be preached at the rest of my day.
Mm-hmm.
I want my faith to inform everything that I'm doing. And so that it's foundational, not like I'm not being hit over the head with it, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I write too. That's the kind of the idea that I write with, is that, you have characters who may be learning something new about their faith, or maybe discovering a new way that God loves them. But in this particular book, The Last Way Home, the faith element was really natural because it really is a prodigal son story.
Yeah.
And so I sort of just took that story, and I love the prodigal son story, but I have a tendency to see myself in each of the characters in the prodigal son story. So you have the prodigal son, yeah, but you also have the father who's like waiting to welcome him home, right? And forgive everything that's happened. But then you also have the older brother in the prodigal son story who's bitter and angry that how dare he come home, and his dad kill the fatted calf and like put a ring on his finger, and all of these things that, and I think to myself, which one of those am I? Who do I want to be? And which one am I? And it changes from day to day sometimes. But
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of real life, is this idea that like, man, I want to be the forgiver. I want to be the one who like welcomes back anybody who has wronged me, and who like joyfully forgives, because I know that I need forgiveness so often. But more often than not, I see myself in the older brother, character of that story going, oh, they don't deserve that. And it's like, oh, that's not where I want to be. That's not the person I want to be. And so I sort of looked at those three characters, and then it was so fun to make characters in the book fill each of those roles. And so it wasn't just that Eli is coming back as the prodigal son, which he is. And it wasn't just that Mama Potts, his mom, is the father figure and can, one of the father figures, and can welcome him back. But it's also Violet, who is Mama Potts's business partner, who can't stand Eli, who like definitely plays the older brother role, but also ends up being the love interest. So, there's a little bit of, of change in that, and making it my own. But yeah, I loved writing this prodigal son story.
It's kind of like the old saying, don't judge me because I sin differently than you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so true, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what do you like most about romances, both written and for Hallmark or on film?
Yeah. I adore romances. I'm a hopeless romantic, and I always have been since I was a kid. Like, just I love romances. I read them, I write them, I watch them, all of them.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, I was talking to a friend about it last night. We were talking about romance in general, but also like specifically about, our books that we're working on and things. And one of the things that like strikes me about romance that I think is so special is the idea of sacrifice. It's just this idea that like in every romance, somebody has to sacrifice in a way that shows the other person how much they're valued, how much they're loved. And I think, like, to me, that's like just such a beautiful reflection of God's love for us, but also like how we love others. And that, yeah, it does require sacrifice sometimes, and it doesn't always look pretty, but that sacrifice is beautiful and is wonderful. And yeah, and it floors me every time.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite Hallmark movies? And you said you told me off air you're a big fan.
I am a big fan. I'm such a fan. So I have a collection of DVDs of Hallmark movies that I've collected over the years. And I don't normally, like, I don't have cable, so I don't get Hallmark most of the year, but always at Christmas time, I sign up for like a special service to make sure that I can watch all the new Hallmark Christmas movies, and I share it with my parents, and we we watch them, and then talk about, oh, did you watch that one? And so yes, so I love them. So I would say that like some of my favorite not Christmas Hallmark movies are like How to Fall in Love.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that one so
That
much.
one's great.
And then one that I discovered kind of recently is called Just My Type. And it's got Bethany
Mhm.
Joy Lentz, I hope I
Yeah.
got her name right,
Yep.
in it.
Yep.
And yeah, she's like a reporter who is trying to get an interview with like a reclusive author. And I love the movie. I thought it was so cute. But there's this line in there where the author talks about like his greatest fear is that if he stopped writing, no one would care.
Mhm.
And for me, I was like, that speaks to like every fear I have. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, what if nobody cares if I stopped writing? And so anyway, so I love that one. And then of
That's a
course,
good
like
one. I forgot about that one, but you're right. That is a good one.
it's like as a writer, like it just
Mhm.
spoke to the
Mhm.
writer in me. I was like,
Yeah.
oh. And then of course I love like Loving Leia is one of my
Oh,
all-time
yeah.
favorites. And The Lost Valentine is so sad, but I watch it and cry every time because it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And then one of my other favorites is a football one, Love on the Sidelines.
Okay. Yeah. I
Yeah,
like that one too. That one gets some kind of divisive responses from people because he is a little bit controlling
he is.
of her. But I like it too. Excuse me. I like it too. I think it's a pretty good enemies to lovers story.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think just the situation that they're in where he's her boss is
Yeah.
like it's got to lend itself to that sort of, he feels like he has to like, I don't know, like
That tit for tat kind of
yes,
thing.
put her in her place or something
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, those are good ones. I like all those as well. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the new book, The Last Way Home?
Oh, sure. So The Last Way Home is, as I mentioned, it's a kind of a prodigal son story. Eli is the oldest of three brothers, and about 11 years prior to the book taking place, uh, Eli's dad took off. He abandoned their family, and Eli said, Eli had not an audition, but a tryout with an NHL feeder team. And so Eli said, their dad left, and Eli said, I'm going to go try out for this. And his middle brother, Oliver, said, okay, if you go, don't come back. We don't need you, kind of thing. They were 17 and 19 at the time, and they're teenagers and not, didn't know how to deal with their feelings and all of that. And so, anyways, Eli takes off and goes and tries out for the NHL and makes it, and then spends 10 years as basically an NHL star, and then makes some really poor decisions, which get him kicked out of the NHL. And nobody really knows why that happened. And so he comes home not sure of the response that he'll have because he hasn't talked to his family in 10 years. Like basically he took his brother at his word, like, we don't need you, and he took off. And so he comes back and he is literally broke. The first line talks about he has a black eye, a fractured wrist, and nothing else to his name. Like that is all that he has. And he comes home and he's really not sure what the welcome will be. He's not sure if Oliver is still going to be, like, pack your bags, we don't need you here. But he ends up meeting Violet, who is his mom's business partner. And and the day that Eli comes home, there's a fire at their pottery shop. So Violet and Mama Potts own this pottery shop, and there's a fire and they lose all of their inventory for the summer. And if they can't sell their inventory, then they can't keep their business afloat. And so anyway, Eli and Violet reluctantly team up to try and save the pottery shop and earn a little bit of money and get a job. Eli's always looking for a job and ends up coaching a youth team that is more complicated than he expected. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, and Violet has her own kind of tragic backstory.
Yes.
And I don't want to spoil it for the listeners, but that was pretty grueling,
Yeah.
I would say. And
Yeah.
yeah, for her to forgive, for her to accept forgiveness from her parents.
Yes.
What was that like to write?
Yeah, that was really emotional for me to write, but also like, I'm glad that it was emotional for me to write, because I hope that then it comes across on the page that it is really a tragic backstory. And yeah, I don't want to give it away either, but she certainly has these secrets that she's been carrying with her. But she's like known Mama Potts and the Ross family for almost as long as Eli's been gone. So she kind of moved to the island shortly after Eli had left 10 years ago. And so she's like, this is her found family. Like, she's become ingrained in the Ross family, and yet she's never spoken about her parents to Mama Potts, who's basically her adoptive mom. And so it's like, there's this, she has this sort of mentality of like, if I just keep it inside, that it can't hurt anymore, or it won't hurt as much if I don't have to talk about it. And I think that it's kind of the opposite in real life. Like, I know it sounds strange, but I've discovered that the things that are painful in my life, the more I've talked about them, it's not that they become easier, but that they, it's almost like the sting lessens just a little bit. And it becomes like, I can talk about this. And when I have someone to share and understand with me, there's just a hope to that then, that you don't get when you're just keeping it inside and just, praying that nobody finds out your secret.
Yeah.
So,
well, and if you just keep it inside, then it will just keep boiling inside. Like
yes,
eventually you have to deal with it.
exactly. And it festers for, yeah, it'll just keep festering.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so she definitely has to come to terms with it, but it's kind of great that both Eli and Violet have these secrets in their past that they're ashamed of and don't want to talk about. But when the other begins to open up, then it's like there's a safe place for them to share. And I think that that's like really key, is finding that safe person, that safe place.
So Mama Potts, that must have been a fun character to write.
She's great. I love Mama Potts. She's super fun. And I always, like, I feel a little bit bad for her having 3 sons who she basically has raised on, like, she basically raised them on her own, because even though their dad was still there, he wasn't a good dad. We'll just put it that way. And so, and then the dad leaves, and she ends up with 2 teenage sons, a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, who she has to like get them through high school and help them survive. Meanwhile, they're all totally broke and in debt, and they lose their house, and they go through like all these really severe things. And yet she just keeps her joy. And so she's just a lot of fun for me. Like, I just love the idea of just thinking about a mom loving on her sons, even as adults, and what a special relationship that mother-son relationship is.
Hey, this is Jen Johans, host of the podcast Watch with Jen, which delivers a steady stream of great movie recommendations, thoughtful career deep dives, and first-rate conversations with film critics, authors, actors, journalists, filmmakers, and more. You can find Watch with Jen wherever you get your podcasts, or hear us first at our Patreon at patreon.com/filmintuition.
I mean, there are a lot of characters in this novel for a romance novel. They really had to balance a lot of characters. Yeah,
for sure. That's been a really interesting part of writing this particular series, is that so it's a 3-book series about 3 brothers, but with each brother, there comes a new love interest there, who brings their own set of friends and people, and it keeps growing each book. So I'm working on the 3rd book right now, and I'm like, I have a lot of people going on here. Like, who have I caught up with, and who do we, how do they all tie together? But at the end of the day, it's been really, really fun, because as the brother in the 1st book found his healing, then to put him into the 2nd book, Oliver, in The Last Way Home, he's kind of a different character because he went through his arc in the first book and really discovered, peace and forgiveness that he needed and needed to offer and needed to find. And so, so anyways, it's a lot of fun to bring this whole family together, but it is kind of growing exponentially.
So the town, I think, is called Victoria. Yeah, in the book. Did you base that on a particular place in Prince Edward Island?
Yeah. So Victoria by the Sea is a real town.
Okay.
It's a real little town on Prince Edward Island on the South Shore. It's not too far from the Confederation Bridge, which is a huge landmark and one of only 3 ways to get to Prince Edward Island. So you can fly, you can take the ferry, or you can drive across the Confederation Bridge from, let's see, it must connect to New Brunswick, I think. And it's like 13 kilometers. So it's about 7 miles, I think. Yeah. It must be because there's a big sign that says 7 Mile Church right next to the bridge. Because there's a little church there. So it's about a 7-mile drive over this bridge. And I have never driven it. It terrifies me. It's just like, it just keeps going and going and going, and you totally lose sight of it. And you have to trust when you get on that bridge that somebody on the other end, like there's an exit point at some point because you can't see it. And so you just put a lot of faith in whoever built the bridge. But so Victoria by the Sea is right there near the Confederation Bridge on the South Shore. And we, it must have been the first time my mom and I visited the island. We were driving along the South Coastal Drive, which is basically just a beautiful tourist drive that you can take along the coast, and you've got the water on one side and the green fields and agriculture on the other side, and you're looking at red cliffs everywhere you go and pine trees, and it's just stunning. It's just so beautiful. But we get to this little tiny place in Victoria called Victoria, and I was like, this is so adorable. So we get out and we walk around, and they have a little tiny lighthouse that's like a tourist trap lighthouse, just there. It's not functional, but then there is another functional one, and there's a community theater there, and it's like a really big deal. They do shows like all summer long. And anyway, I just fell in love with it. It's just such a cute little town of like fishermen, lobster fishermen, and artists and theater people, actors, and community shows. And so I just decided, okay, that's my series. I'm going to have a lobster fisherman. I'm going to have somebody who deals with pottery and art. And then the third book is about the community theater.
Oh,
yeah,
that sounds fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Is that one? This is the second one. So when does that third one come out?
The third one comes out next summer.
I'll look forward to that.
Assuming I can finish writing it.
I'm a huge theater buff, theater nerd.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. I go to as many shows as I can.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah. So if you were going to, if The Last Way Home got optioned by Hallmark, and we were going to make a Hallmark movie, since you're a big fan, who do you think you would cast of the Hallmark talent? Who would you cast as Violet and Eli?
Okay, I got to think about The Last Way Home. Who are my characters? Okay, so I'm a big fan of Autumn Reeser. And so I think she would make a great Violet. I think that would go well. And then who would I pick for Eli? I feel like I can't think of his last name. Corey somebody. He's been in a couple of Christmas movies.
Oh, okay. Shoot. What is it?
Is it
Sevier?
Okay, that's better. There we go. Yes. So I think he would make a great Eli. He feels like he plays that like kind of wounded, wounded tough guy pretty well. Yeah.
The only thing, I don't know if I could see him as a professional hockey player is the only thing, but I think he would be good. I think Niall Mater is the clear choice to play Eli.
Oh, really?
Yes. I mean, he's played a hockey player already on Hallmark. So he's already kind of done that. That's maybe why I thought of him.
Yes.
But yeah, I think he would be really good.
Oh, that was the one with Rachel Lee Cook,
Mhm.
and she owned the bookstore. Yes, yes, I've seen that one.
It's a good one.
And oh yeah, he would be good. He would be good.
And I like Autumn. I think Autumn Reeser's a good choice. Yeah, I mean, I always love her. She's great.
Yes,
And so yeah, and I think the two of them would work well together.
I think so.
So I think that's good. If you're listening, Hallmark, we got the casting done for you.
Yes, done and done. You guys are all set.
Yeah, yeah. Well, very good. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
And we'll have links in the description if people want to, affiliate links if people want to check out and get the book. We'd like to take a second from this episode of the podcast to celebrate our sponsor of this episode, and that is the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast?
Do you want an inside scoop into what happens on the podcast?
Do you want early access to episodes and loads of cool perks?
Now is the time to become a patron of Hallmarkies podcast.
By becoming a patron, you get to access our patron Facebook group.
You can request episodes or even be a guest on the podcast.
And most importantly, any patron can join our monthly movie watch-alongs with stars like Paul Campbell, Natalie Hall, and more.
It's as low as $2 a month to join in and become a special part of the Hallmarkies family.
Please consider, and we will love you forever.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
But before we let you go, we have our fun, silly questions. So
Oh, yes.
yes. So what is the best ice cream flavor?
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yep. It's interesting because I don't really like cookie dough in the sense of like there's these places where you just get like a whole thing of cookie dough.
Right,
It's too
right.
much. It's too sweet, but I like it in like little things
Little
in the ice
dabs.
cream. Yeah.
Yes.
With you there. All right. What's your favorite color?
Purple.
Oh, me too. Yeah, good. All right. What music are you into?
A little bit of everything, not everything. Mostly country is what I listen to
Yeah.
these days.
Nice. Okay, good. What is your go-to date night food if you were going out?
Oh, if I was going out on a date. Well, it's more like that's a process of elimination because it can't be Italian because I slurp my noodles and I end up spilling all over myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Salad is like all over me. So probably like and I don't care for seafood. So like I'm gonna go with like a steak.
Yeah.
Like or pork chops. I love a good pork chop.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's a good choice. Well, if you were to pick, what would be your ideal date activity?
Ooh. Okay. Well, I love movies. So I would like to say going to the movies, but I don't think that's like a good first date activity because you can't talk to the other person.
Yeah, we say on this podcast that if you're going to do the movie date, you should do, instead of dinner and a movie, you should do movie and dinner.
Yes.
Or
yes.
movie and a treat or something like that, because then you can talk about the movie.
Exactly. I went on a date not too long ago that was that. Like we went to the movie and then we went and got nachos afterwards. And it was like, oh, that was ideal. I do love
that sounds fun.
Yeah. But I would say like I do like miniature golf or like anything like or bowling. I'm really bad at both, but things where you can like where you're up and moving around and can talk to each other and sort of laugh together. I think that it says a lot about somebody too, like how seriously they take themselves if they can't laugh at their own bad bowling, like then maybe we're not compatible because I'm definitely gonna laugh at it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Which do you like better, dogs or cats?
Probably dogs.
Yes. Okay.
I don't have either. So
okay. Yeah. Same. Beaches or mountains?
Mountains, but just by a little bit because I think beaches are beautiful. I just don't like the ocean.
Oh, okay.
I'm scared of the ocean. I don't. Or more, I'm scared of what's in the ocean.
Oh, sharks and stuff.
And seaweed, it wraps around your ankle. I don't like any of that.
All right. What is your favorite holiday to celebrate?
Christmas.
Yeah. It's hard to beat Christmas because it's a whole season. where everything
Right.
else is just like a day or maybe a week or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Last question. What is your favorite Hallmark or romantic movie?
My favorite ever. Um,
I know it's tough.
oh man, it's just hard to narrow it down. But I will say that like the one that probably impacted me the most is Disney's Beauty and the Beast.
Mm,
Like the animated one that I've watched since I
mhm.
was a kid. That to me is like, yeah,
That's
that's
one of my favorites.
yeah, I love that
Good
one.
choice. Good choice. Well, you did it. You answered all the questions.
All right.
Very good. Well, do you have social media or anything like that you want to share?
I sure do. Yeah. I am on social media pretty much, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all at Liz Johnson Books. Yeah, Liz Johnson Books. And my
Great.
website is lizjohnsonbooks.com.
Great. We'll have all that information in the description. So make sure y'all check that out. And like I said, we have the affiliate links if you want to read if you want to read The Last Way Home, you can get the book there and help out the podcast. And so we appreciate that. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave us your ratings and reviews. That helps us a lot. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group and merch store, so take a look at that. And thanks so much, Liz. This was really a fun interview. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of you guys and just delighted to be here.
Great. Well, let us know what y'all think of all the things we talked about, and we'll talk to y'all later. Bye, everyone.